So welcome to this episode of Unmute, and this time we are going to delve into something totally different. Civil society has always been dabbling with art, but never actually caught it properly. Very early on, we used to have a lot of these jathas and creative writing and songs. Slowly, as market and civil society started impinging on each other, civic society started losing its understanding of art and design. And I thought one of the things we want to do in this episode is to ask those questions to what is the relationship between art, market, civic space, state, and art practitioners, design practitioners in one sense moved out of the civic space and created their own little niches. Maybe there's time to think through why this separation, and therefore in this episode we're going to delve a little deeper. We have two different people here, little separated in age, gender, but also in the kind of work they do. And pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Vijay Sekhon. He heads the design school in Anant University. Am I wrong?
I had the interaction design program.
You head the international design program. And of course, you really have a span of work in corporate, in filmmaking. You were in New York with that
Merchant Ivory production.
Merchant Ivory production, which you were part of. And then, of course, academic practice. But I was impressed when I saw that huge painting that you did, and something connected with you when I saw that. There is anger, there is an expression, there is asking the right questions. And that's when I said, must get him. I want Dr. Sekhon and have a conversation with him. So thank you, Dr. Sekhon, for...
Thank you for inviting. I mean, it's my first podcast, so I'm looking forward to talking to you and with Avni and with you, looking forward.
So let me now also introduce Avni Sethi. Avni actually works at the intersection of art, memory, looking at healing processes, looking at she has built 2 conflictoriums in Ahmedabad, in Raipur, creating spaces for people to come, experience, and in a way relook at the violence that they may have experienced in their lives, and come to terms. Creating those spaces is something that Avni has been doing not only nationally but internationally in different spaces. And I'm sure in this interview we'll explore some of those areas that you have experimented with, what has worked, what has not worked, what are the kinds of lessons you have through that process. And creating dialogue, which I think has been one of the important part of those processes. And I'm sure those experiences that you have had will be very, very much contributing to this. Both Dr. Sekhon and Avni, really welcome to this episode of Unmute. But also, just as a upfront, in the interest of transparency, she also happens to be a daughter of Gagan Sethi. I was earlier, and both Gagan and I were discussing about how do we bring in the the whole area of art as a form of resistance, and that is how it grew. And then we looked at, so Gagan came from looking at your large work on the ground, and then I came from curation. I said, hey, we should get this two together, and that's how 2 of you have come very organically with a very recent thing that both of you were involved with in curating that Ahmedabad festival. So Gagan.
Yeah. So we'll begin with you. Can I call you Vijay?
Yeah, please, that's better.
So Vijay, you have a huge span of work, and we saw that you art, you design technology, you teach. And in all this, we really want to understand, who are you? And therefore, what makes you who you are? That work is political. And there's something burning there. What's burning and why is it burning and what sustains you?
Yeah, I mean, right from, quite a naive and silly thing, but right from very early childhood, I was always curious about why the way I see, why I see the way I see. What really conditions the way I see things? What are the really, forces that are really shaping it? I mean, the word force came much later, but I was really curious about, is this the only way to see? Or are there alternative ways to see? And that question has never gone away. I mean, that question was there when I was, as long as I remember, I was 6, 7 years old. I mean, looking out through, I grew up in Naranpura, Shastri Nagar area, in the flats, and there was a large ground, and I still remember there were 2 trees looking out of from the window. And I was always wondering, is that the only way to see those trees? Is that the only way? And I constructed my own little worlds to kind of, see through that. But that question was always there, even when I went to art school in Baroda. And I think that has really helped or propelled me to find things out or try to find things out. And me going into corporate world was a very different, I mean, I was always on the other side of that coin. And going into the corporate was always like, wait, I'm not part of this world, I'm actually part of, but then I realized that, being part of that side of the coin is how the worlds are intertwined, how the things are intertwined. It's not like this, us against them or we against you, it's not that. It's the interweaving of things that is really what defines the life. And I think that maturity of that, understanding of that was good. The second question that really sort of was implanted in me, rather, from my teacher, guru, called Professor, and also an artist called Krishna Reddy. He was in New York, was part of NYU. And I spent a lot of time with him in Washington Square Park. And that was my real education. I mean, I had college nearby. So after my college, I would spend a whole afternoon sitting with him in the park, and we would just observe the world passing by. That's all we did. And he was a student of Abhindranath Tagore, and Jiddu Krishnamurti sent him to Europe to study. Okay, go see the world. If you want to grow, you need to see the world. And he was a textbook. Like everything I read in textbook, he was there sitting with me and admiring my stupid doodles, which I would do in my book. And it's like, okay, wow, this is incredible. And I look, no, this is not incredible. This is silly doodle. But that element of surprise, that element of life, that really, gave me something that, that looking at things that with that fresh eye, having that freshness in the eye is so critical. It's so critical and it's so fragile and it's so difficult to save and protect. And that's the work you have to do as an artist. That's the element that you need to protect and nurture and mature over time and deepen that process. And I think that's where those 2 questions of this element of something that needs to be very alive and full of life. What you do, doesn't matter what you do, but if it is not alive, if it's not breathing, then it's not worth it. That's what I have kept very close to me. And the drawing you saw, or the college I'm working in, and I'm looking at my own, the department I'm working, I'm looking at as a 10-year life sculpture project. I'm not looking at anything. It's a life sculpture project. It's a 10-year period I've given myself. If I can carve a space which has these elements in it, which can actually propel things, propel students, propel that environment to look at the world from fresh perspective, fresh eyes, and I think that's good.
But Vijay, when I like the word when you say look at things with a fresh eye. Fresh eye means look at the world differently, without bias or another type of bias, and not get colored by who you are. But it's quite a process to look at yourself and the world and deal with it. But there's politics there.
That is, I mean, there is politics. There is politics. There is self-awareness. There is understanding of what is consciousness. There's, I mean, this whole range of self-inspection and self-criticism, and to really be aware of the position you are in. You know, what position are you taking and where you are. I mean, most of the time in the tech world, because I'm embedded so much into it, people always look forward, like look at the future. And as coming from that art process, I've always sort of gravitated towards where you are. And that's more critical than where
You want to go.
where you want to go. Because if you are aware of where you are, then you can relate with the world around you. You can relate with the people around you. You can relate with the society around you. Not with something very futuristic in terms of tomorrow we're going to do this or tomorrow things will be better. But what are you doing now and how are you connecting with the world around it?
But isn't it being rooted in your reality, but in touch with your historicity, and then project what you see as the future? It's simultaneous.
It is simultaneous.
The process, all three-pronged process. Yeah.
It is. I mean, it is.
For me, it's this basic human being who is different from an animal because he or she can do this, be simultaneous in the three.
Correct.
Past, present, and future.
All three spaces.
And I think modern education either cuts your history, either forces you only in the future, or then deeply roots you in your present. But to look at all three simultaneously is art.
It is art, yeah.
I think it's a good lesson of how civil society looks at their own selves before trying to change the world.
Only coming to you, because we now see the creations that you have been part of, whether it is Conflictorium here, I have seen and visited that, the Conflictorium in Raipur, but what shaped this being? What are those early experiences that shaped your self-narrative, that made you do something of this nature, that create those spaces? What is that? What shaped who Avni is today?
I mean, I can really tell two stories. One is, of course, the early influences that I had in my life. And the early influences really were with people who were engaged in change making, whether it's who I'm like, where I'm going to bed with and I'm waking up at some sort of meeting, some Melan somewhere. And of course, both my parents were involved in change making work and all their friends. And so this is a narrative I heard in my early formative years. But this is not of my choice. This is not of my doing. I think there was a time when I went to design school. And when I was at design school, I had the choice to study whatever, to not have a specialization. And in the process of not having a specialization, I would do a little bit of like weaving, a little bit of joinery, a little bit of typography. And one of the things I realized that I was just a very angry student. Whether I'm learning how to like join two logs of wood, I'm still very angry about it. If I'm learning how to do typography, I'm still very angry about it. And what I had to really resolve is that you have to continue to do this, and I have to continue to be a designer who brings some amount of joy and can do this, build some craft in her hands. Then I have to resolve this problem of anger that I have. And I was really lucky to have the kind of design education that I did have. That gave me space through the final project to say, okay, go pick a project that you would like to work on for 6-8 months. I think that's really where the interrogation began, saying, why am I so angry? And I think the reason that I gave myself was that you have to go back to Ahmedabad and figure this out, because this anger of what is unresolved is very much in the location, in the city, the environment that I grew up in. And until I interrogate that, because it's so latent, it's sitting there until you ask of it to speak back to you, is that there is really no way of explaining why did I grow up in the kind of environment that I grew up in? Why did I see the kind of violence? What did it mean? And violence in the city that I grew up in, which is Ahmedabad, shows up everywhere. It's omnipresent, either in covert ways or in overt ways. It really shapes your it shapes the way you walk in the city, and depending on what your privileges and accesses are, that violence becomes more evident or less evident to you. Because of the kind of family that I came from or what my parents were doing, my ability to actually point it out, even though I had the kind of privileges I did have, to make that violence pretty kind of evident, became easier. So I think that really shaped my early years of how I came to frame the world that I saw. And I think design school. I think design school can be a really life-changing experience. And it was for me. And it's so strange because I didn't choose it for myself. I was a dancer. I trained starting I was 7, and that's what I wanted to study. Until every dance school that I decided to go to, and I decided to go to 3, enrolled, and I had to leave because either that education in dance were either demanding a particular kind of patriarchal submissiveness from me, or it was just outright being built on really polarizing communal ideas, became sort of the underline of how this dance education. So I really, in frustration, said there is no school available where I can study dance, that I picked the closest education, which was design education, which really sort of, I feel like, I remember when I got out, and even 10 years hence or 15 years hence, I feel like, it should be the kind of education that everybody goes through in any case, as part of schooling.
But also dance, performance, those also you have been in those areas when you felt your words were inadequate to express what you wanted to express, right? And how did that then land to some of the other creations that you have? So starting with yourself, then extending it to kind of a social institutions, because that's a journey that one has to traverse from oneself to building institutions which are little bit detached from you, but they are also part of you.
Yeah. I think one of the things I realized that it wasn't only me. So when I came back to Ahmedabad, I was looking for a peer who I could talk through this with. And we were all looking for space to be able to process what we had seen around us. And I think 2 things felt quite clear. One is that there is a lack of space to be able to have conversations that are difficult. And second, that we have to find a language to be able to have this difficult conversation. And by language, I don't necessarily mean find the words, because by that point of time, our polity has produced enough of these kind of words that are, splinter making, that you can respond to a single word and decide what your position is, or who you are, or whether you're on this side or that side. This kind of polarization based on singular words. And so therefore language is not great. And so what is it that we have? And the grammar that became available is really art practice, because it was honest. It really laid bare who you were, what can move you. You can't fake it till you make it. That's not possible here. It became the thing between 2 people to be able to talk around and talk through. It's like we're watching a film. How do you see it? How do I see it? And why do we see it differently? And while the journey began from saying we're really interested in audiences and talking within audiences, and very quickly that journey became about, but what are audiences seeing? And so the journey moved towards, let's work with artists, and so that we can have this kind of dialogue which is complete and circular with the artists and with the audiences.
Vijay, let me bring you in here, because she's talking about the politics of the splinter words in a way. Your experience of looking at some things in an immersive way, and what are the kinds of narratives that we need to be really building, which do not reproduce the society as it is, but something which is laden with hope, looking into the future. So, how do you build those narratives? What's the kind of experiences or examples, or maybe some anecdotes that you may have that this was one of the things that I tried to do, and this is how it resulted. That because ultimately it's is the fight and conflict of narratives at one level within the society that we are engaged in whichever form that we engage with that. So if you can give some.
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of pick up from where Avni was talking about, and I think there's some shared conflicts we had, and I think growing up in Ahmedabad in the 80s, a lot of communal violence in Ahmedabad, and as a kid growing up in Ahmedabad during that time, it deeply affected me. I mean, that was part of the motivation of, is this the only way things ought to be? That's where the question really comes from, because the newspapers were full of images of different kinds of violences that were erupting in the city, and I was imitating those violent games in the way I was like to kind of just reproducing it in my own as a game. But that's where the question really comes from, and I've had a long journey to kind of figure out, or rather develop a more site-specific responses to work. But that's been a kind of a journey of what are the different ways and strategies to really engage with the world. How do I really talk? And how do I really listen? So that's been the kind of motivation, and that's been the kind of process of coming to developing a more site-specific projects. And to give you an example, like working with my students, we worked in a neighborhood in Mazgaon, in a place called Matar Pakadi. It's a mixed neighborhood. That whole Mazgaon area and Matar Pakadi area, which is a heritage sort of space, and it had Jewish community, it has the Christian community, it has the Muslim community, it has of course the Hindu community, it has all kinds of community, and it's gentrifying, rapidly gentrifying. So again, polarized views, whether they want to gentrify, whether they want to move out, whether they didn't want to move out. So a lot of stories were going on, and so we embedded in that neighborhood engaged with that neighborhood actually for 1 year, on and off, and we created a whole range of experiences where interactive radios were created, where the stories could be listened by turning a dial, and you could hear different people's story. A game was created where the neighborhood characters were part of the game. Photograph exhibition was that each photograph was linked to a short documentary that was produced. A feature-length documentary was produced. Live performances happened. Entire project was installed in the neighborhood itself, and it brought the whole neighborhood together. And one of the community members said, it is so good to remind ourselves that we are a community. And this has inspired us to form an association. We did not have an association, but that has inspired us to think that maybe association would help us have a collective voice. I mean, for a project to emerge from a classroom, for students to go out and do something, and where these kinds of conversations get enabled, and this is immersive environment. This immersive environment, a lot of times are thought about as a VR experience or as that. But this is immersive. You are really creating all kinds of experiences.
But Vijay, I would be interested to know these students, because I'm an educator, that's my core business. These students who went through this must be life-changing for them. What are they doing now? Are they continuing that practice? And that's my angst. What happens?
So they're all working professionally in companies and doing all kinds of
market-based.
Market-based companies, all kinds of design. But I get messages from them.
There is
humanizing messages that I saw a book, which is, you taught us to be an explorer. That that, so they also kind of get reminded of this, that time. But sometimes things takes time to
when it
grow,
erupt back,
and but it's a seed that is planted, and sometimes it takes a decade, maybe decades, for it to come back to. But it's you never forget the things you do really engage in your undergrad.
No, because you have deeply experienced them in
Deeply,
that
and
way.
you come back to it again and again in different ways. It's almost like you're going in a concentric circle, but you come back with new experiences, and sometimes that circle takes 20 years. But it takes time, and I think that's how I'm looking at it.
No, I have very similar thing, but sometimes I ask myself, dil to nahi behla raha.
Yeah. Is it worth it?
You know, we share a little bit of the history of the conflictorium, little bit. Then you took off, and I moved out. Ultimately, what's the purpose? Why? One is your expression, your search for meaning through this. But there are a lot of people who come there, and there was a time I would come there once a month and read their, how that has impacted them, and there would be about 40, 80, and I would find, about 10, 15 were really intense experiences. And so what is it that, does that? And what's the design behind it? What's the maqsad behind it? And how do you take it forward?
Actually, the conflictorium was never about my self-expression. It never could become. And this is part of the design, that institutions that facilitate expression or facilitate dialogue cannot center singular human beings. That for sure ensures that then none of that can happen. So I think part of the design was that there are multiple holders of this experience that is being built. I think with the conflictorium in particular, I would say it's also at the time and at the place that this experience was happening. The audiences were largely from Ahmedabad, and sometimes people from other cities who are visiting, because then it goes on to your 7 things to do in Ahmedabad type of lists. If I have to really zero down on what is the methodology that we practiced, at any point of time, no one is speaking for someone else. So this really became a very important part of how we curated at the conflictorium, that everything that will be seen at the museum will be people speaking of their own lived experiences. And I'm actually pointing to a much larger sort of wave or tide within the arts, where more recently art that sort of advances some kind of activism has a lot of currency today. But there is a danger here. There is a danger of artists instrumentalizing people's lived experience, their lives, some of these issues, to make points that need to be made for sure. But what is the kind of investment in those ideas? Is it like, oh, I research an idea and then I make some work out of it and then I gather personal currency? We were curating the conflictorium really at the brink of this danger. And I think what the conflictorium chose to do then is that how do we locate and how do we place ourselves in the groups that are actually making from within. So this is not a question of how does the museum represent representation. These are slightly messy kinds of conversations that are very, very, they've come in a big way in the arts. We're going through a really turbulent time within the larger art worlds. Earlier we used to say there is a art world, but there are art worlds that operate. So we were practicing at a time where this messiness was becoming all-consuming. The other thing that the conflictorium chose to do, simple things like we said, we will never materially engage or buy anything that we need to do an exhibition with outside a 5-kilometer radius of the conflictorium. What does this mean? It means that there were conceptual questions we wanted to engage with or ask, but the materiality of doing this can't take over the thing at the heart. Or there were moments of saying, and I'm going back to this question of instrumentalization, where you say something is put on the wall and you see it, and you remember this time when we were talking about art having a message. This very deeply problematic manner of producing work. It's like, I know something and I'm going to give a message. This manner of making practice really needed to settle and go to the grave forever. It really was work that makes you deeply uncomfortable, that speaks from its own location and from no one else's, that is provocative, that may ask something in very unsettling ways, but essentially doesn't make you feel like I can go out there and change the world, but it can like turn the lens inwards and says, who am I and what is my own location and position in the world? I think that really became the heart of the conflictorium method.
And no, but what was its impact? Because then you got awards and you got this and you got that, and what did it do to it? And what stage you said, but this is not what I wanted?
Meaning, this impact question is such a trust for this word to come up in a conversation around art practice, in a conversation around civil society, and because this is also a framework one has inherited from civil society, like civic funding, right? This kind of measurement of impact, and how do we do this for ourselves? And this has been a challenge for us continuously.
I mean, I'm not coming from that
Right.
impact, and that I also...
Right, you also struggle with it. Yeah. We all do.
But in terms of impacting lives and transformative kind of processes.
I want to actually steer clear of this idea of really linking these two ideas, of linking art practice, how it's received, what it does in the world, and for the sort of possibility of impact to happen or it impacting lives or changing lives. I want to de-link these ideas because the process of making art is a transformative process in itself. The process of encountering art is a transformative process in itself, but does it show up in changed action? Maybe not. Does it show up in maybe a kind of discomfort that one has with oneself and how one walks the world? Maybe yes. Can I see it? It's hard. Unless we are ready to recognize in very, very individual moments what transpires. That individual moment of someone who's been coming to the conflictorium starting like its second year, and they came there every week for 4 years straight up, then they started volunteering, then became part of the team. You get to know them, you get to know the kind of circumstances they've lived through and what the conflictorium meant in their life to just carry on. And there are several of these examples. Many, many people who have written in exactly those registers saying, only coming here makes sense. This is the only way I can make sense of the world at this point of time. But what I'm trying to do is also just complicate this very kind of clear relationship between art making, art experiences, to this kind of clear relationship, this clear thing saying it changed something. It's such a long arch. It's so long that one can't, but one is sure that the arch exists, but it's too long.
And we should keep investing in it.
Absolutely.
Who?
I'm changing a little bit of a sequence here because I want to bring Vijay. You have exhibited your art internationally, and all those kinds of things. Where so in a way the canvas or an installation becomes a kind of a political space or a dissent and do you still believe that artists have a space to really question the power and what do you see as the change in the context? And I'm not only referencing to India. There are so many countries where that power of dissent and the context in which that dissent can express itself, and especially using art as a medium, intended, unintended. I'm not getting into that issue that Avni was trying to say, but still, what's your thinking on that?
I mean, are you kidding? It's the heavily most censored sort of, expression, practice globally. I mean, at the moment, it's not just, the war is not happening somewhere far away. It's happening now, and we are part of it. The war is in your phone, in your everyday life, and you're dealing with propaganda. You're dealing with so many layers of influences that the level of energy, level of vigilance, the level of awareness required to navigate through that is just immense. And it requires, it's not a single person's job anymore. It requires a sense of people coming together and helping each other out to navigate those very troubled sort of spheres of influence that are constantly influencing and changing the environment we are living in. And I think, look at art practices in India, globe, most censored probably. You have to be very benign to now exist. It's almost like that.
Or be redundant.
Or be redundant or be benign. And probably in India, maybe to some extent, stand-up comedians are doing to some things. But that's about it. Yeah, so it's hard. It's not easy. But so the art has that power. It definitely has that power. But it needs a lot more than just an individual trying to express himself or herself. It requires people coming together to support it. It's hard. So I'm as part of reading into the what's happening from the technology perspective in the world and what's happening in the art. I'm like deeply disturbed and deeply sort of aware of how the, as she explained, troubled the waters are, and how do we navigate through it. I do not know. Honestly, I do not know.
No, but Vijay, I want to even challenge some of the polarities that you're saying. Some of us were part of this, the whole Nirbhaya thing. Yeah. And then that women's movement demanding a huge fund, crores during Manmohan some time, the Nirbhaya fund. And then from that emerged the concept of safe cities. We do a little bit of safe city work, is part of our rule of law program. But where most of the money of safe city is going? In CCTV cameras and surveillance. And that's designing, and then, technology is being used for that. And when actually safe city is so much more, so many other facets, and yet all that thousands of crores, and then design schools being asked to design surveillance. I mean, how do you handle that polarity? You're an artist. I mean, doesn't it?
I don't know how to handle it. Honestly, I do not know. But yeah, it right now technology is more used to control in many aspects, in to also capitalize as much as possible, um, because it requires, as the technology is progressing, it is requiring bigger and bigger investments, and the more advanced the technologies are getting, the more investment it is requiring, and the moment that big money comes in, it demands returns.
So does it kill art? Does it kill expression? I mean, does it kill conflict?
I've always felt that the most troubled times probably creates opportunities for most interesting works. Most interesting
More
work.
creative.
Yeah, because I've been reading the book on anti-fragile, like when, that idea of you not breaking but becoming stronger and finding ways to, seep through those tight controls. How do you seep through it? And I think that's where the challenges, where there are strategies.
I was reading another book that was actually making a cause, like a plea for anti-resilience, saying our civic structures and state powers are actually bringing this narrative into our life so much that you have to be resilient, you have to resilient. Why do you have to be resilient? Meaning, why are you producing the circumstances in the first place to be resilient? It's like, हम और जुल्म करेंगे, तुम और resilient हो. And what is this kind of resilience that we want to grow?
No, but I still want to take it, and maybe you can, both of you, and I'm hearing you at Conflictorium as through art seeding expression, dissent, for its own sake, no purpose, and the previous experience, the community part, which really touched me. Again, you are using art for community, not using, but the very fact that you engage with community through art, there is, there is a positive love, compassion, empathy, which it produces. How do you sort of navigate then what is happening in colleges and schools where the opposite is being taught? I mean, both of you teach. I don't know.
Again, I'm borrowing the expression which Krishna gave me in his beautiful essay called "Art Expression as a Learning Process," and that has stayed with me. And I thought, it resonated with my own sort of way of seeing things, and it just articulated it nicely. And I've taken that quite seriously, in the sense that the work that we did at the community, work we did at these neighborhoods, was never intent to bring the communities together.
It was unintended.
We did not start. We just started with an idea that what's going on. We want to understand what's going on without really thinking the design. I mean, most of my work and the way things, you never really planned it in the sense ke aisa karenge, waisa karenge. It's rather you have to throw yourself. That's why how my father taught me swimming. Just throw in the deep. Tairo nahi to doob jaoge. So I've kind of taken that as a only way to navigate and work with something which is very large and ambitious. Otherwise, it can get intimidating and daunting. Like going to Bombay, working in this neighborhood, you don't know. If you ask too many questions, oh, you are being a helicopter, you're going to go there and just be there for some time, go away. You're never going to do anything. It's like you really have to just go out, and with that attitude of listening, and maybe something might emerge which would be of interest.
Yeah, but as civil society, I find parallel. Our job was just to listen and relate.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then came project planning and the market and then the impact. And that went away. And today we are just instruments of domination of the market. And then we are expected to be creative. Creative in what? You know, these are, from your conversation, I'm reflecting as to how civic space is getting caught, and therefore it has to liberate itself very seriously.
Yeah.
So both of you are educators at one level. Both of you are individual artists, performers, whatever. But at the same time, you are educators, right? One of the key question, Gagan said he is also an educator. I also have done a lot of education work in different types of education work. In a broader sense, not in terms of the college curricula, which also I've done, but one of the deep beliefs that we had is education is supposed to humanize people, right? Humanize. So the products of that education process is humanization, and then that feeds into the society, and you create that humane understanding of the society. With all the things that are happening, and especially in, say, design education, in the art education, are we in a way robotizing the human beings in terms of particular kinds of standards? And isn't that a kind of a counter thesis to what we intending to do? You know, just if we both of you can briefly relate with this conundrum.
Meaning, the way to think about this is also of how much the market is present also within, say, some of these institutions, right? When we were studying, when I was studying, a classroom used to be 12 people, 14 people. Today we have classrooms of 60 people, 120 people, right? Design school is now about, you know, you churn out talent that then is up in the job market, and they have to get jobs, and how much money you put in and what is the ROI. We have about, last I counted, we have about 12 design schools in Ahmedabad city alone, and up to about 1,000 design schools in this country. That is producing up to about, say, like every batch every year is being, like there are about, from the smallest is producing 100 to sometimes 700 students a year from one school. So what are the number of designers out there, right? When we say this, we mean that what can, in terms of a facilitator in a classroom who is trying to primarily shift how a fully circuited young mind comes into the classroom with all the influences they bring, all the biases that they bring, now of course mediated through technology as well, and therefore that influence and bias set is much larger than a pre-technology, pre-social media, fresh young foundation student who came in. This process of unlearning the foundation years and going through design education is like we are standing on ideological warfare in classrooms sometimes. Because what is it that design education can do? Is it skills that one can teach? But this skill training is there, out there, meaning you can learn today, you can learn skills online without needing to have a teacher. You can learn how to edit. If you're a filmmaker, you can learn how to use the camera. You can learn your graphic design, how to use specific softwares. You can learn how to make 3D models. You can learn all of these things. So when you come into a design school, what is it that the educator can do with you is either to say, here, look at this world. It's in deep disagreement with the world that you had seen so far. And sometimes institutions allow for that sort of opening up of these windows, and some institutions absolutely say, we put our foot down, there's a CCTV camera in the classroom to monitor what is being said and what will be shown. So the question of design education having fundamentally that ability to humanize is at stake.
Vijay, what's your take?
So a student came to me a couple of months ago. He said, I've heard that interaction design department में अच्छा आदमी बनते हैं.
इंटरनेशनल ह्यूमन डिजाइन में अच्छा आदमी बनता है.
You become a better human being. And I said, who told you this? Where are you getting this? He said, that's what students tell me. You become a better human being. So I want to come to interaction. But though I'm interested in filmmaking, but I want to come to interaction because we make a better human being. So I was like, okay, fine, thanks. But you should still do filmmaking because that's what you really want to do. And so that's one part. The second part is, how do you, if you want to go beyond ideologies and really go and kind of uncondition yourself and kind of bring out your own potential, then probably this is one of the space where that is possible. I'm not saying it's happening all the time, but I'm saying that's the space that's possible. And I think that's cool. I mean, I really consider it as a good possibility that if that can happen, that you go beyond your any ideologies in the world, but you go to who you are and kind of figure that out in your own way. And this environment can help in some way facilitate that process of you finding your own voice, your own stand, your own positions. And I think if those questions are raised, then it's good. And as Avni said, you can get all the world knowledge in the world from wherever, but college accelerates that information, little packages it for you to you get it faster. You can get the same information. Maybe you might have to take a full circle, but teachers have done that going around and packaged that and given you that capsule. So it's rather a shortcut. So that's on the college, but it's not about you learning a software. It's not about learning a technique, but it's about you figuring out how to learn. That point. If you kind of develop that attitude, if you develop that way of seeing it, then I think you will sort of navigate and figure it out.
अब बेसिकली इंसान बनाते हो, बाय चांस डिजाइन भी सिखाते हो. And I remember that I used to love that ad, Tata Steel का. We also make steel. थोड़ा आगे चलें विजय, और coming to your contemporary work or your profession. And if I go back, I was already a semi-professional जब NID शुरू हुआ था. And people like Ashok Chatterjee and all. And design education was to solve problems of water, of energy, environment. Design was applied to social problems. And धीरे, what you were also saying earlier, इतने हजार produce कर रहे हैं. And the market has taken over to sell their coffee, sell their chai, sell, I don't know, underwear, whatever. But yet, how did it happen? And how did we allow it to happen? Or is there still space where you are in your pedagogy, getting a few students? What are you doing to ensure कि थोड़ी तो ज़मीन पे rooted रहे वो लोग? Is there anything in the design pedagogy itself that you are ensuring? And I'm listening to how you saw life. And, how are you handling that?
नहीं, ये हैंडल इस तरह से हो रहा है कि कुछ स्टूडियोज़ आर फोकस्ड, और रादर कुछ स्टूडियोज़ का जो मेन एजेंडा रहता है वो थोड़ा सोशल स्पेस की तरफ रहता है एंड द सोशल कॉन्टेक्स्ट की तरफ रहता है. एंड कुछ स्टूडियोज़ होते हैं जो क्रिएटिव एक्सप्रेशन, लाइक दे आर एक्सप्लोरिंग समथिंग, दे आर एक्सप्लोरिंग एन आइडिया, वो उस तरफ जाते हैं. And some studios are very sort of technical. They learn the
that can be applied anywhere.
They can be applied anywhere. तो इस तरह से एक थोड़ा सा मिक्स रहता है. और एंड आई थिंक चैलेंज ये रहता है कि हाँ किस तरह के सवाल हम पूछ रहे हैं, वो सवाल वो बच्चे रिलेट कर पा रहे हैं कि नहीं. हमारे सवाल नहीं पूछने हैं.
But I mean, you don't directly catch the bull by the horn. For example, Ahmedabad में manual scavenging and sewage में अभी भी दारू पिला के आदमियों को अंदर मरते हैं, फिर हम लड़ते हैं कॉम्पनसेशन के लिए. टेक्नोलॉजीज हैं, इंटरनेशनल टेक्नोलॉजीज बहुत महंगी हैं. IIT मद्रास ने कुछ किया, it didn't work. But first sensitizing the city that ये क्या हो रहा है, and then technology, then tools, ये सब मतलब doesn't hate anybody.
एक तरीका था बात करने के लिए कि आप क्या कर सकते हैं डिज़ाइन फील्ड में. और ये एग्जाम्पल था वो एक जापानीज़ फ़ैन जो है, जो उसका एक कोना है कि आप बहुत नीश चीज़ें कर सकते हैं. जैसे क्राफ्ट में आप पॉटर हैं, सेरेमिक ग्लास ब्लो करते हैं, बहुत नीश. उसका दूसरा कोना है आप बहुत बड़ी चीज़ें विद लार्ज टीम्स बना सकते हैं. जैसे आप एक सुपरसोनिक एयरक्राफ्ट डिज़ाइन कर सकते हैं. आप बहुत नीश लेज़र टेक्नोलॉजी से आप मेडिसिन में कुछ कर सकते हैं. और फिर वो एक बीच का हिस्सा है, व्हाट वी कॉल मिडल ऑफ द फैन. जो मिडल ऑफ द फैन है वो उसमें सबसे कोट एंड कोट कम रिकग्निशन है, उसमें सबसे ज़्यादा हार्डवर्क है, उसमें शायद उतना लुक्रेटिव नहीं है. तो सवाल ये उठता है कि जब हम डिज़ाइन में उतरते हैं और ये जो हम सेंसिटाइजेशन या ह्यूमनाइजिंग की बात करते हैं कि हमारा इंस्पिरेशन ऑफ वर्क ऑफ वेयर विद इन आवर सोसाइटीज़ आर वी प्लेस्ड, हमको क्या दिखता है. तो ये जो मिडल ऑफ द फैन है, ऐसा लगता है कि सबसे कम इनवाइटिंग है, पर इन अ सेंस सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि हमारी ज़िंदगियाँ का जो क्वालिटी है वहाँ पैदा होता है उस मिडल ऑफ द फैन से. और क्या डिज़ाइन स्कूल्स और ये डिज़ाइन एजुकेशन का पूरा प्रोसेस है, क्या वो दिखा सकती है, कैन इट विजिबलाइज द वैल्यू ऑफ द मिडल ऑफ द फैन? दिस इज़ अ क्वेश्चन वन लिव्स विद एज एन एजुकेटर.
अभी जैसे एक बच्ची है, अभी मेरी स्टूडेंट है, वो मैनुअल स्कैवेंजिंग पे रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट कर रही है. शी केम टू मी एंड लाइक this is a year-long project I want to work with and really want to understand what's happening in this space. So, but it has taken few years for constant engagement with different ideas, where now this is students are feeling that this is okay.
ये भी कर सकते हैं,
ये भी कर सकते हैं, ये भी कर सकते हैं, ये भी कर सकते हैं. But taken few years, like we had हम लोग ने म्यूनसिपल कॉरपोरेशन को जब एंगेज किया फॉर स्मॉल प्रोजेक्ट विद एजुकेशन ऑन व्हील्स, और स्कूल ऑन व्हील्स वाला जो इनका प्रोजेक्ट था, उसमें काफ़ी स्कूल्स भी एंगेज हुए, कॉलेजेस भी एंगेज हुए, हम भी एंगेज हुए. तो स्टूडेंट्स का सवाल, जो आपने कहा, स्टूडेंट के सवाल उठे कि ये हम क्यों करें इतनी गर्मी में, शाहपुर में या उधर जाके स्कूलों में, म्यूनसिपल कॉरपोरेशन की स्कूलों में, छोटे स्कूलों में, वाई आर वी एंगेजिंग, इससे हमें क्या मिलेगा, इससे क्या. तो वो जो एक एटीट्यूड है, ट्रांजैक्शनल एटीट्यूड, उसको भी ब्रेक करना ज़रूरी है. और कई बार उसको कॉन्शियसली ब्रेक करना पड़ता है कि नॉट एवरीथिंग इज़ ट्रांजैक्शनल. You have to see life beyond transaction, what you get out of it. Not everything has to be looked through that lens. And I think वहाँ पे conflicts भी होते हैं, questions भी उठते हैं, क्योंकि गर्मी भी है, धूप भी है, conditions are not right, it's not air conditioned, it's not, it's all that is not there. But I think somewhere it over the period of time, I think it creates a certain space within you that allows you to do and think beyond yourself.
But for example, गाँव में मैं इससे झगड़ता रहता हूँ कभी कभी, जब टाइम मिलता है, वैसे टाइम नहीं मिलता इसको, बट कि ग्रासरूट क्यूरेटर्स क्यों नहीं बनाती जो अपने अपने गांव में कॉन्फ्लिक्टोरियम बनाए? शायद अब कर रहे हैं, बट गांव में वी डू लाइक कम्युनिटी बेस्ड रिसर्चर्स, कम्युनिटी बेस्ड डिज़ाइनर्स जो अपने गांव में ये सवाल पूछ के, ये यूनिवर्सिटी डोंट वांट टू इन्वेस्ट इन
इसमें
दैट।
एक बहुत स्पेसिफिक मसला है। अगर हम हिंदुस्तान में डिज़ाइन स्कूल देखें, unfortunately it has been a largely elitist education just by the virtue of what does it cost to study at a design school. तो आप बस एक डेमोग्राफिक देख लें कि इन डिज़ाइन स्कूल्स में कौन पढ़ते हैं। आज डिज़ाइन स्कूल की फ़ी 4, 4.5, 5 साल का अगर कोर्स है तो कहीं 15 लाख से लेके 50 लाख से कम में आप डिज़ाइन नहीं पढ़ सकते। उसका मतलब ये है कि एक पूरा तबका डिज़ाइन नहीं पढ़ सकता, और एग्जैक्टली वो तबका जिसको ये जो सिविक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, हमारी सोशल रियलिटीज़ है, सबसे ज़्यादा द पीपल जो जिन पे असर होती है, एग्जैक्टली वो तबका डिज़ाइन स्कूल नहीं, वो अवेलेबल ही नहीं है वो एजुकेशन। तो फिर हम पूछें कि क्या गवर्नमेंट और इन्वेस्ट करेगी डिज़ाइन एजुकेशन में? या जब प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स आते हैं वो क्या मोटिवेशंस के साथ जब डिज़ाइन स्कूल्स खोलते हैं, तो वो मोटिवेशंस बहुत क्लियरली इन द काइंड ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट्स, इन द काइंड ऑफ प्रोजेक्ट्स, वो बहुत क्लियरली बहुत क्लियरली दिखता भी है हमको।
अवनी, आपने जो किया है कि एक डिज़ाइन एजुकेशन, परफॉर्मेंस स्टडीज, थोड़ा एक अनकन्वेंशनल ऐसी ट्रैजेक्टरी आपकी रही है। अभी हम फॉर्मल ट्रेनिंग की बात कर रहे थे ना, तो ये फॉर्मल ट्रेनिंग आपके खुद के इतिहास में क्या सामाजिक सवालों पर काम करने की आपको उससे प्रेरणा मिली, कि उससे शायद इतनी प्रेरणा नहीं मिली, रादर बंधन है कि ये क्यों कर रही हूं मैं ये सब सीखने के बाद में? यू अंडरस्टैंड कि वाज इट एम्पावरिंग फॉर यू टू एंगेज इन सोशल इश्यूज, or was it obstructing you to engage in social issues?
I think very early on, I came across this kind of dichotomy of ideas that I had to work through. One is questions of art, culture, design, and I'm hyphenating them loosely at the moment, as active political frames of engagement or as decorative frames of living with. या तो वो स्टेटस क्वो को शिफ्ट करते हैं उनकी एंगेजमेंट के साथ, या वो किसी चीज़ को सुंदर बनाते हैं। और मैं ये बिल्कुल नहीं कह रही हूँ कि किसी चीज़ को सुंदर बनाना अच्छी बात नहीं है, ये अच्छी बात है, चीज़ें सुंदर होनी चाहिए, पर इंटेंट, मोटिवेशन बड़ी चीज़ें होती हैं। खुद की डिज़ाइन ट्रेनिंग, या खुद जब मैं परफॉर्मेंस स्टडीज़ भी पढ़ी, जो एक फ्रेम था कि परफॉर्मेंस के थ्रू हम दुनिया को कैसे समझ सकते हैं, ना कि सिर्फ कि थिएटर देख के थिएटर के बारे में हम लिख पाएँ, पर वो पूरा फिनोमेना हमारे आसपास थिएटर ही तो हो रहा है। एक नेशनलिज्म का थिएटर है, डेमोक्रेसी का थिएटर है, हर किस्म का थिएटर है। तो ये सारी ट्रेनिंग एक तरीके से आपकी जगह दुनिया में क्या है, आप किस चीज़ को आगे ले जाना चाहते हो, वो मैं कहूँगी मेरे एजुकेशन में वो ऑप्शन ज़रूर था कि आप वो देख सकते हैं, आप चाहें तो उसके साथ एंगेज कर सकते हैं, ना चाहें तो उसको बिल्कुल बाईपास करके बहुत खूबसूरत क्राफ्ट्स पीपल के साथ जो वो बनाते हैं उसको 300% मार्कअप पे आप बेच सकते हैं, बिल्कुल।
या बट ऑल्सो अभी तक हमने जिन जिन से बात की है, इंडस्ट्री से, आई थिंक सब लोग एक मैसेज हमें दे रहे हैं, एंड आई वांट टू चेक इट विद यू, कि हमने कोलैबोरेटिव स्पेसेस कम कर दी हैं। हम बहुत, जिसे कहते हैं, साइलोज में घूम गए हैं, और सब नॉर्मली कहते हैं कि academic institution are the best place to bring together, but from the lens of civic space को strengthen करना. Because ultimately अगर democracy नहीं होगी तो आपका art भी नहीं होगा, freedom of expression नहीं होगा. तो as institution, do you see space? कि वो space ही नहीं है. Given that you're a market, वो लड़ाई जंग जारी है कि नहीं?
नहीं, वो जंग तो जारी है. आई थिंक तभी तो टिके हुए हैं. कुछ देर इज़ अपॉर्चुनिटी है, एक उतनी फ्रीडम दी गई है कि इस तरह के प्रयोग, इस तरह का एंगेजमेंट कर सकते हैं, दैट स्टूडेंट्स को जिसमें से हेल्प मिले, दे कैन ग्रो एंड फाइंड सम बेरिंग्स ऑफ वेयर दे कम फ्रॉम, वेयर दे आर. तो वो कोशिश तो पूरी है. वी आर एबल, वी ट्राइंग वेरी हार्ड एंड ट्राइंग टू फाइंड ऐसे लोग जो हेल्प करें उस प्रोसेस में. तो ये है, ये जगह है, ये थोड़ी जगह है, इसीलिए कोशिश कर रहे हैं और इसलिए हैं वहाँ पर, उस स्पेस में हैं. सो दैट आई से दैट वेरी फॉर्मली एंड क्लियरली कि वो है. कैसी है, क्या फॉर्म में है, वो डायनेमिक है. वो डायनेमिक है, वो स्टैटिक नहीं है. मतलब दैट रिलेशनशिप इज इवॉल्विंग एंड चेंजिंग, एंड तो वो आपको सीखना पड़ेगा, वो आपको डायनेमिसिटी के साथ वर्क करना पड़ेगा. एज एन एजुकेटर यू हैव टू फाइंड वेज एंड मीन्स टू डू इट.
With all this, opportunities, both in terms of technology, in terms of the global market, वो सब होने के बावजूद भी हम स्टूडेंट्स को क्या एक उनकी सामाजिक जिम्मेवारियों में थोड़ा भी टिक पा सकते हैं कि नहीं टिक पा सकते हैं?
क्या है कि जितना ऑटोमेशन बढ़ेगा, ऑटोमेशन तो बढ़ रहा है, सब जगह पे हर स्पेस में आ रहा है और आएगा, बट सेंसिबिलिटी तो आपकी है ना,
चॉइस.
तो वो सेंसिबिलिटी आप कैसे डेवलप करोगे? जो ऑटोमेशन प्रोड्यूस कर रहा है उसको आप वैलिडेट भी कर रहे हो कि नहीं कर रहे हो, वो सेंसिबिलिटी आप में वो आएगी कहाँ से? वो आएगी, I mean, if you engage with your neighborhoods, if you engage with people, when you engage with, when you listen, I think वहाँ से वो sensibility develop होती है कि what the automation is generating, is this generating something which is, does this even work, or it's like a very top-down kind of a thing. तो वो आई थिंक हमारी कोशिश यही रहती है कि आज के टाइम में जितना ऑटोमेशन बढ़ेगा वो सेंसिबिलिटी को डेवलप करना, वो एक पर्सपेक्टिव, एक एटीट्यूड को डेवलप करना, सो दैट यू कैन वर्क विद द मोस्ट एडवांस्ड टूल्स इन द वर्ल्ड. डज नॉट मैटर what you do with it and what you tell through it, that matters. So what are you going to tell? What is the story that you are going to talk about?
That is quite critical.
बट जो इंस्टीट्यूशनल आर्किटेक्चर तो सैनिटाइज करते रहते हैं, बाहर भी सैनिटाइज हो रहा है, तो उसको कैसे एक्सपोज करना, पेडागॉजी क्या है? आई टेल यू, मैंने MSW किया था, मैं कहता हूँ W है. आई डिड माई MSW 77 और फील्ड वर्क था, 3 दिन फील्ड वर्क, 3 दिन थियोरेटिकल क्लासरूम, क्वाइट अ बिट. हफ्ते में 3 दिन फील्ड में जाना, ये, बट इट वॉज इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज्ड काइंड ऑफ थिंग. तो व्हेन आई फर्स्ट जॉइन माई जॉब in a development organization which is more from behavioral science, I said क्या करना है मुझे बताओ, I'm ready, तैयार हूँ. ऑलमोस्ट गोल्ड मेडलिस्ट था, मेरी बीवी ले गई गोल्ड मेडल. तो उसने बोला, दोस्त 1 साल तू गांव में रहेगा, मंडे से फ्राइडे. मैं कहा क्या करना पड़ेगा, कौन सा प्रोजेक्ट? बोले प्रोजेक्ट है, मुंह बंद, कान खुले, आंख खुली, और कुछ नहीं करना. दिस वॉज माई 1 year टू डीसैनिटाइज. अब क्या हम ये कर सकते हैं? एंड इट्स द सेम थिंग विच यू बिगैन विद, seeing through it. But initially it was punitive. सारी ईगो क्रश हो गई. अब मैं ऑलमोस्ट गोल्ड मेडलिस्ट, ये जाके गांव में रहना, सुनना, और वो भी मैंने कहा मोटरसाइकिल नहीं, बस में जाएगा. You don't deserve, abhi to tu, you have to. So I'm just giving, that was the hard way out. Is there a more advanced, innovative way?
No, I don't think there is any shortcut to it, or there is an advanced way to it. You have to go through it. I mean, देखो एक टीचर का एक one of the important job होता है to tell or share with student what is important, whether to see that, whether to recognize it or not see it, that is up to the student. But I think for a student, for a teacher, these are important things in life and in society. So वो हमें as honestly as possible with our experience, we have to point at that. And that's where I think I stopped, in the sense of, okay, this is important. I'm bringing those aspects on to the fold, into the fold. We can work with it. And there are students who engage with it, there are students who do not engage with it. And that's how it is.
But then privatization comes. If universities were for technically liberal arts are supposed to be funded by the state, but when market funds it, then वो जो civic space का problem आ जाता है. If you look at any society which has moved, Europe, Germany, जहाँ देखो वहाँ this kind of liberal education was state funded.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Baroda Art School and my fee for 500 rupees.
Yeah, same here.
Girls
I
were
was in
300.
Baroda.
Girls were 300 rupees. So अगर आप 2,000 रुपए में आपका बैचलर हो गया, 2,500 रुपए में, you can take risk, you can take chances.
Correct.
But with that kind of
15 लाख देने के बाद में आप चांस नहीं ले सकते.
तो रिस्क थोड़ा एपेटाइट आपका कम हो जाता है. तो वो चैलेंजेस हैं, इश्यूज हैं, उसको आप डिनाई नहीं कर सकते हो. बट उसके साथ we have to see what we can do, how we can work, where are the punctures possible, where the seepages are possible. You have to try and do and work with that. And that's what, as faculties, as people we do, So it's not as straightforward.
So before we close this section, Avni, आपको पूछना है कि आपको जेन लॉम्बार्ड अवार्ड मिला आर्ट और सोशल जस्टिस के लिए. उसके कारण वो एक कॉन्वर्सेशन जो है कि एक कला और सामाजिक न्याय, ये जो चर्चा है वो एक ग्लोबल स्टेज, और आप उसका एक रेसिपिएंट के नाते से, तो वो ग्लोबल कॉन्वर्सेशंस और यहाँ के कॉन्वर्सेशन, इसमें जो जुड़ाव है, वो जो एक सॉलिडारिटी का मैसेज, हम वो जमाने से गगन में कि जो एक इंटरनेशनल सॉलिडारिटी के माहौल में है कि एंटी अपार्थाइड स्ट्रगल साउथ अफ्रीका में हो रहा है, तो हमको यहाँ लगता था कि हम भी वो स्ट्रगल के भाग होने चाहिए. इस ढंग की एक सॉलिडारिटी की महसूस थी हमारे में. तो आप क्या सोचते हैं? अभी ये अवार्ड आपको मिला, एक रिकॉग्निशन मिला, एक ग्लोबल कॉन्वर्सेशन हुआ, लेकिन जब हम माहौल देखते हैं अपने देशों में, अन्य देशों में, सच्चाई में एक डिवोर्स हो रहा है कि आर्ट और सोशल जस्टिस का. तो उसके बारे में आपका क्या कहना है? एंड देन वी विल मूव टू द नेक्स्ट एंड द लास्ट फॉरवर्ड लुकिंग बकेट. बताइए.
I mean, it's a very interesting, it plays out in very interesting ways. क्योंकि एक तरीके से अगर आप सोशल जस्टिस में काम कर रहे हैं, जिस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में काम कर रहे हैं, वो तो आपको अप्रिसिएट नहीं कर सकता, वो मुमकिन ही नहीं है, क्योंकि आप उस स्टेटस को थोड़ा सा परेशान कर रहे हैं, उसको हिला रहे हैं. तो उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में तो कभी रिकग्निशन हो नहीं सकता, शायद होना भी नहीं चाहिए, क्योंकि कौन रिकग्नाइज करेगा. और वही बातें आ जाती हैं कि अगर आप सोशल जस्टिस के लिए किसी के साथ लड़ रहे हैं, किसी के सामने वो ही आपको कोऑप्ट कर लें, तो फिर क्या ही बनता है. अब अगर हम कहें कि इंटरनेशनल सॉलिडारिटीज़ या रिलेशनशिप्स बनना, ये एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग मूवमेंट है, जिससे कभी कभी क्या होता है कि ये स्ट्रक्चर्स खुद के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, खुद के देश में गेट कीपिंग भी होती है. तो कभी कभी ये इंटरनेशनल रिलेशनशिप्स अलाउ यू टू सर्कमवेंट सर्टन काइंड्स ऑफ गेट्स. जैसे मैं कहूँगी कास्ट को लेके जो बात है, कितने लंबे समय तक जितना इंटरनेशनल एक्सपोजर आर्टिस्ट का, हिंदुस्तानी आर्टिस्ट का हुआ इंटरनेशनली, वहाँ पे बहुत रेयरली कभी कास्ट की बात हुई. जब से ये जो लिंक्स स्ट्रेंथन हुए, international links with artists, say from marginalized communities, where they are making direct one-to-one relationships and contacts, where say an artist from a Dalit background is making from their very location and showing it outside, in Germany or in the Netherlands. For that world to have an in or an image into what is going on back in this community, like in this country, and hear it in the very voice of the people who are going through it. Because when it is representative, it's said very differently. So these international solidarities force, there is a return. It forces the local context then to recognize those artists themselves and say, like, wait, you have shown here or there, or you're being spoken about, but we actually haven't even shown shown your work at a single exhibition or a group show even. Forget like giving you a solo exhibition. So these solidarities do return and make, they change this kind of, these relationships in interesting ways.
Interesting. So, Gagan, let's look
No,
into the
but-
future.
Yeah, but Vijay, if I tell you dream, as a design art person,
As an educator.
and with as an educator, all three roles, and with a fair amount of power, what would be your dream कि या desire कि ये अगर हम करें, या if this is the path we take, you will be happier, you will see more meaning, and that's where the future of this world post what's happening today in Trump and Netanyahu world, and that'll go. Kab tak rahega? These people come and go, we go on forever. Institutions are longer lives. But personally, what would be the looking into the future with technology, all that? Where are you locating the future and what do you wish and dream?
Damn, never thought about it.
It was my job too.
I don't know. I mean, it's a very. I'm not trying to kind of. ऐसी कोई बात नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि जिससे कि I'm actually where I am. मैंने हमेशा ये देखा है कि आप जहाँ हो, एंड जो सवाल मैंने शुरुआत में किया था अबाउट द फ्लैश, उसका एक रिलेटेड सवाल है जो हमेशा जुड़ा हुआ होता है उसके साथ. और रिलेटेड सवाल ये होता है कि आप कैसे रिलेट करते हो, आप कैसे रिलेट करते हो अपने आप से, दुनिया से, और कॉस्मोस से, if you're part of that cosmos. So इन तीनों के साथ आपके क्या रिश्ते हैं, इस रिश्तों की आपकी क्या समझ है, उसकी गहराई बढ़ती जानी चाहिए आपकी मैच्योरिटी के साथ, एंड वो मेरा हमेशा से वो मतलब एक एम वही रहा है, एक एम और कि उसकी आपकी गहराई बढ़े, उसकी आपकी समझ बढ़े, तो यू हैव अ बेटर अंडरस्टैंडिंग के ऑफ हु यू आर, हाउ डू यू रिलेट. तो वो सब मेरे ये बड़े एग्जिस्टेंशियल से मेरे ड्रीम्स रहते हैं, और कि यही मेरा उद्देश्य है. और इसमें मैं कोई मुझे आई एम नॉट थिंकिंग ऑफ एन अल्टरनेटिव वर्ल्ड, कि दिस इज़ द वर्ल्ड दैट आपको वर्क करना है, और इसी वर्ल्ड में आपको वीव करना है ऑफ डिफरेंट थ्रेड्स. तो मेरा हमेशा से एक पर्सपेक्टिव रहा है कि the context you are in, how well do you weave the carpet you are weaving,
That's an artist talking.
Yeah, that's
It's a metaphor. Yeah.
That's a metaphor. That's how I see it. I do not see, कि ये आ जाएगा तो ये better कर दूंगा, मैं ये कर दूंगा, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. Because, it's difficult. Things are difficult outside. It's not easy. And I understand, I come from a certain, एक certain privilege है मेरे पास. और उसको मैं granted नहीं ले रहा हूँ. एक जो बच्चों के भी सवाल हैं बाहर निकल के existential questions हैं. These students, a lot of students are taking loans, are coming, they're coming, probably their parents are also looking at them कि ये हमारा, घर संभालेंगे,
हमारी किश्ती को पार ले जाए.
हमारे किश्ती को, मतलब ये भी एक है, उनकी खुद की भी aspirations हैं कि they want to have a better life. All those things are very real. Yes, they're very strong. And you have to work with that forces, and they feel confident enough to deal with it then in their own way. I think that's where I kind of put my stop at the moment. And as I said कि Indian philosophy में एक बड़ा अच्छा concept है कि जिस ज़मीन पे आप खड़े हो वो ज़मीन static नहीं है, dynamic है. तो concepts भी हमारे यहाँ पे dynamic हैं. संवाद, इसलिए तो हमारा पूरे philosophy संवाद पे है. So that dynamicity is the space you hold. And how well you understand that dynamicity, how well you understand the nuances of it, and how well you can work with it. I think that's where I kind of
Got you.
want to think about it.
No. I see it. But
Avni, you always, number of times आपने बताया कि जनतंत्र सीखना और फिर से सीखना ये बहुत जरूरी है. ये आपका एक कोट है, ये सिर्फ मैं हिंदी में उसका अनुवाद कर रहा हूं. तो ये सही है कि ये जरूरी है कि यू हैव टू कीप रीइमेजिनिंग डेमोक्रेसी एंड रीलर्निंग डेमोक्रेसी. इट्स अ कंटिन्यूअस प्रोसेस, ये तो मानते हैं हम सब. उसमें एक आर्ट, एक कला की क्या भूमिका होनी चाहिए और वो भूमिका को हम कैसे आगे ले जा सकते हैं, उसमें आपको होप दिखती है कि नहीं दिखती है क्या?
The thing with hope is that who can give up hope? You have to have a lot of privilege to give up hope, क्योंकि जैसे इस देश की जनता तो hope पे ही जिंदा है और कुछ तो हो नहीं रहा. So of course one does what one does, hoping that it will be better tomorrow, and whatever one can do in the process of that better arriving. But the question of democracy and what one's role as artists particularly in democracy is that मुझे नहीं लगता कि democracy convenient है. वो convenient नहीं है, पर वो ज़रूरी है. और अगर हम जो आर्टिस्ट हैं या जो लोग हैं जो दुनिया को उस कन्वीनियंट के चार दीवारों के बाहर देख पाते हैं और कहीं ना कहीं उस तरफ पॉइंट कर पाते हैं कि all is not well. This is the first recognition on how we make a better democracy. How do we root our expression is rooted very much in listening, in lived experiences of people who are like us and who are not like us. And artists have a role to play there. I want to go up to the extent of saying that if your practice as an artist is not shifting something, I want to really interrogate that as whether it is art at all.
Mm-hmm. I'm closing it and then Minar can close it differently, but you know what, I've taken one line both, as art and design people, and I think civil society can learn a lot, is how to be deeply reflective. And reflective practice is critical to an artist's way of thinking, constantly questioning oneself, never be satisfied. I think right through the conversation, I saw both of you, asking the difficult question to yourself first, before asking any difficult question to the world. I think it's a lot to learn where civic society has missed the bus and started more doing than being. It's not doing mein ghus gaye. That being is, an artist is just being. So thank you for coming here and being with us and talking to us. But Minar, would you want to?
No, ये बहुत ही बढ़िया बातचीत हमारी रहेगी. एक जो होप, nobody can give up the hope कि आशा का तो हम, ये बहुत प्रिविलेज लोग ही शायद आशा को भूल सकते हैं. तो उसके साथ बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप दोनों हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए.
Thank you for inviting. Thank you.
Thank you.